today at our debate, which is called Poland, Western Balkans, Together Towards the Future. My name is Anna Kurowska, and I am Director for Grants and Projects at the Foundation Institute for Eastern Studies in Warsaw. This debate is a part of a bigger project under the same title. This project was co-financed by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Poland, and it aims at presenting the role of Poland in the Western Balkans countries' European integration. So I hope that during this discussion, we will be able to see that problem from the perspective of these countries, as well as the impact of the regional and internal policies in this region on relations with the EU, as well as the public perception of the European Union and the Berlin process, so the European integration process in general. Poland has been a part of European Union for the last 16 years, and it's been a time of great economic boost and Poland's growth on the international arena. For example, Poland's 2019 presidency in the Berlin process, which is a crucial part of the European Union's enlargement policy, and Western Balkan Summit in Poznań last year are the best examples of Polish input in the development of EU. What is important that Poland does not only want to be a promoter of the Western Balkan countries' European integration, but we want to also share our experience regarding the political or social and economic changes. So I hope that we will be able also to emphasize that. We also have to be aware, and I think that we also are aware, that the last couple of years were pretty tough for European Union and its member states. Migration crisis, economic crisis, Brexit, or very recently coronavirus crisis and pandemic, it all influenced us a lot and influenced our lives. So what I would like to also discuss during this, this debate is if the perception of the EU changed over these last few years in the Western Balkans countries. Also, what I would like to ask is, do your countries still see European Union as the best solution for them? And finally, how can Poland help in this process and maybe inspire some changes? So now I would like to welcome and introduce our today's panelists. So it's Ledion Krisafi from Albanian Institute for International Studies from Albania, and Sanita Hadjovic from Center for Security Studies from Bosnia and Herzegovina, Donika Marku from Kosovar Center for Security Studies in Kosovo, Marko Pejovic from Center for Democracy and Human Rights in Montenegro, Maria Risteska from Center for Research and Policy Making in North Macedonia, and Jelica Minic from European Movement in Serbia. So we can see that we have a representative of each country of the Western Balkans. So I'm really glad to have you here. And now, after this very short introduction, I think we can move to our discussion and the first round of questions, which will concern each of our countries' internal policies and your point of view on the topic of the EU in general and the Berlin process itself. I want to address the first question to Ledion Krisafi from Albania. Ledion, in your article, you mentioned that society in Albania is very fond of European Union, is very fond of European integration of your country. As I remember, it was around 80% of responders. But on the other hand, you also noticed that society in Albania is not quite sure that Albania is ready to join EU. So what I would like to ask you is what should be done in Albania to change that attitude? And did previous objections from France, Denmark, or Netherlands influence government or society's attitude towards European Union and European Union's integration of Albania?
Thank you, Anna. Do you hear me? It's okay with the audio? Okay.
Yes.
As you said, in fact, it's more than 85% of population in Albania. They are in support of the European Union. It has decreased a little because some 2 or 3 years ago, it has been 87%. I think it's a record in the Western Balkans, this high level of support. At the same time, more than half of the population says that Albania is not ready to become part of the European Union. I think the reasons why they think this way are obvious. Albania has considerable problems with rule of law, with new institutions which are not yet stable, with competition laws and other problems. So in a certain way, it's understandable why the majority of the population, they see that Albania is not ready. At the same time, Albania has its per capita for GDP per capita is one of the lowest in Europe. For example, last year it was 31% of EU's average, and this per capita has changed a little, just 1 or 2% compared with 4 or 5 years ago. So in a certain way, the reasons are there. The main question at the moment is, what is Albania doing about this to change its perception? In a certain way, Albania has been done this thing in the last 30 years. At the moment, I think the major reform, the major development in Albania is related to the justice reform. It has started 6 years ago. It was proclaimed in Albania as the biggest reform ever, not just in the justice reform, but in total in Albania. But the problems have persisted. One of the reasons why Albania's relations with the European Union at the moment, the fact that it didn't open the negotiations last year, but they opened in March. The fact that Albania still hasn't a date for the first intergovernmental conference with the European Union is based on the justice reform, and especially on the Constitutional Court. In the last 5 years, Albania, let's say unique in the history of the country, but maybe unique also in the history of Europe, doesn't have a Constitutional Court, doesn't have the Court of Appeal, because the transformation of the justice reform in the country was such that all the judges from the Constitutional Court, all the judges from the Court of Appeal, they were dismissed by this vetting process, which you may be known in the case in Albania. So this reform, as I said, is fundamental in Albania's relation and role to European integration. And I think your question about how we can change this perception of Albania, if it is ready or not to become part of the European Union. I think this justice reform and the new justice system in Albania is fundamental to change this attitude of the population at large. Because in a certain way, I can say that the population of Albania has created great hopes, great expectations, if you can cite Charles Dickens, about the justice reform in Albania. Because, for example, in each of the polls of the studies that Albania Institute for International Studies has done in Albania in the last 10 years, when you asked people about what was their main complaint about in Albania, they said justice reform, the justice system. And when you ask people which was the main corrupt institution in Albania, the majority, over 80%, they said justice system. So in a certain way, if you want to change Albanians' attitude and faith in Albania's own power to become part of the European Union, you had to change the justice reform. we are still far away from the end. Of course, as I said, we don't have a constitutional court, we don't have the Court of Appeal, but the system is developing in a certain way, especially the vetting system, which in Albania has created a lot of, let's say, problems, controversies, in the meaning that a lot of people were pro, a lot of people were against it. In my view, and I think in the view of foreign institutions and organizations in Albania, the vetting process and the justice reform until this moment when we are speaking has been successful, because it has totally transformed Albania's justice system. It has, in a certain way, dismissed those who were found to be corrupt or couldn't justify their wealth. And in a certain way, a certain time, it has returned a certain belief, let's say, of populations to the justice system. We are still a long way, as I said, to see if this belief will be rewarded in the end, because the population, from our studies which we have done, the Albanian population, they just, in a certain way, they expect some results in the end. Because, as I said, Albania has been frequently mentioned as one of the most corrupt countries in Europe in the last 30 years, but no politician, no high politician has ever gone to jail. So there is a disparity, high corruption, but nobody has gone to jail. In a certain way, Albanian population expects, frankly, someone to go to jail in the end, because if there is this much corruption, someone has to be punished. This thing, if it is created by the new justice system, will be fundamental in Albanians' change of attitude towards the European Union. What you said about France and Denmark,
but
and
very shortly, because we are running.
Yes, of course.
And we have to.
Their concerns, in a certain way, were related mostly by the asylum seekers from Albania. Until now, I think Albania has fulfilled all the requirements that were especially by France and the Netherlands and Denmark about this issue, especially the new law, the new measures undertaken by the Albanian government, and the reaction, at least from France, in the last weeks and months has been positive. So the problem was temporary at the time because of the asylum seekers. It was not let's say, a large or big problem which could take a lot of years to resolve. In a certain way, I think Albania has tried to resolve it in a certain way. So those objections, I think, do not stand anymore.
Thank you a lot. So the most important right now is to reform your justice system. Thank you a lot, Ledion. Now I would like to ask a question to Jelica Minic. So Jelica, in June there were parliamentary elections in Serbia, won by Serbian Progressive Party, but these elections were also boycotted by some opposition parties. So how did the results of these elections influence the EU integration process in Serbia, the implementation of reforms? Did it influence it somehow? Are there any changes in this process or not? And if you also could add a few words on the topic, how did the pandemic and the crisis caused by the COVID-19 pandemic in Europe influence the perception of EU in Serbia?
Elections are still the main topic. After the elections were held on June 21st, we still don't have the government. So practically,
the longest time.
The longest time ever in Serbia. And it was announced only yesterday that the day before yesterday that the new president of the parliament will be our Minister of Foreign Affairs, still actual one, because we don't have the new government. We learned for some names that they will be again in the government, our Prime Minister, Ms. Brnabić, and but the problem is that President Vučić announced that the new parliamentary elections will be held in a year and a half again, together with presidential elections and elections for Belgrade, city of Belgrade. And so it raised a lot of interest, of course, and dissatisfaction regarding this combination of three levels of elections to be held at the same time. But it also proves that the ruling party and the ruling coalition that won the elections, which were rather irregular, although also the opposition boycotted the elections. So it proves that they also understand that there is something wrong, that something wrong happened with the last elections. It will there is a feeling of illegitimacy. There is no credibility of such outcome. It's under 50% of citizens with voting rights that took part at the elections. In Belgrade, the percentage was very low. And the ruling party absolutely dominated media. So the access of the opposition to media was very low. So everything was reflected in the European Commission report, country report on Serbia. All political criteria have got the assessment that no progress, some progress here and there, but generally there is no progress in the whole complex of political criteria. Even in the public administration reform, then in judicial reform, then there is no real progress in fighting corruption. Some limited progress was registered. Some level of progress also in fighting organized crime. Fundamental rights, there is a big problem with fundamental rights, with media, with there is no progress in freedom of expression, and there is also growing pressure on the civil society organizations. So the whole scene is not encouraging at all. And having in mind that there is no progress in the rule of law, first of all, there is no progress in all fundamentals that are priorities of the European Union or of the European Commission. So we didn't open any chapter this year, any negotiating chapter. The first year, 2015, we opened 2 chapters, then 16, 4 chapters, then 17, 6 chapters, then 18, 4 chapters, then 19, 2 chapters. This year, no chapter opened. So this is the message. And the authorities it was obvious they didn't feel easy about that. Vučić made some dramatic comments that he is only one that should be accused, that he is guilty for everything, but it wasn't half serious that what was the things that he was saying. Obviously, they were not satisfied with the report, but the report only made evidence of the real state of affairs. We also had a problem with aligning Serbia with the European Union foreign policy declarations and measures. Last year, 2019, the percentage of our alignment was 57. This year, for the half-year report, only 48. So this alignment in foreign and security policy is also a big problem. And the third problem is, of course, dialogue Serbia-Kosovo. We have some developments this year. Serbia is not the only one that is taking part in the dialogue. We have Serbia, Kosovo, and mediator. The European Union as a key mediator. We had United States involved also in this process with very interesting outcomes. But these are more or less the key issues that Serbia is dealing with, and we cannot say that in these fields Serbia had a great success. The only area where the European Commission said that there was a progress is in the field of economy, economic criteria, legal and institutional changes, adoption of EU acquis. So we had progress in company law, intellectual property law, competition and financial services, but limited progress in public procurement. And this is a very big problem because it's also a foreign policy issue, because we have several big players at our scene, like Russians and Chinese companies, not only companies, and where transactions are not transparent at all. So, and public procurement rules, European public procurement rules have not been implemented at all. These were arrangements state to state. And there is also an assessment, very short one, that Serbia played a constructive role in the regional cooperation, what is true. But it is also ambivalent policy, because Serbia is very proactive and constructive at multilateral level. But in bilateral relations in the region, in the Western Balkan 6 group, Serbia is not a constructive player. So this is more or less the landscape of our relations with the European Union and the evidence they made.
Yes, thank you for your remarks. You mentioned the regional policy and the relations with Kosovo, so I would like to ask about that later our speaker from Kosovo as well, because these are two states that are mostly involved in these matters. But now I would like to ask Sanita Hadžović, so representative of Bosnia and Herzegovina. You mentioned in your article, Sanita, that for Bosnia and Herzegovina, European integration process is mostly a peacemaking process. We know that Bosnia and Herzegovina is divided into two entities, so Federation of Bosnia and Herzegovina and Republic of Srpska. I wanted to ask you, are the actions taken towards European Union integration and reforms, European Union also reforms, are those actions equally supported by these two entities? Like and Republic of Srpska.
Yes, the EU integration process in Bosnia started primarily as a peace-building process because stability in Bosnia was a precondition of stability in the region and stability in the whole EU. So after the armed conflicts, the Dayton Peace Agreement was a basis for that peace. But this basis has to be provided to be constant in the future. So the Euro-Atlantic integrations, they were a logical step in that direction. Of course, since then, some progress has been made, but I can say that that progress is quite insufficient and very slow. As I mentioned in my article, 60% of citizens of Bosnia believe that the joining to the EU would have no or even a negative impact in the country. And also 36% of citizens of Bosnia believe that Bosnia will never become a member state. So in general, we can say that the slow progress is very much affecting the people's opinion in both regions of Bosnia, but I will come to that back later. So considering your question, I would say that support exists in both entities. The distinctions are not very much expressed because I will take an example of the survey conducted by the Directorate for European Integrations in Bosnia, which they do annually. In that survey, in 2019, at the state level of Bosnia, almost 80% citizens would support joining. The year before, the number was 56%, and the year before that, 2017, it was 69%. So we can see the numbers at the general state level are varying. And considering the entities, for example, in 2019, almost 90% respondents from the Federation, they said that they would support the joining of the EU, 60% from the RS also, and 70% from the Brčko district. So you can see that the support comes from all the entities and the district, of course. Support comes for the advantages that the joining would bring to the citizens, as they responded mostly the advantages of constant peace and stability, freedom of movement of persons, goods, and trade, capital, respect of laws, etc. So, okay, coming back to the loss of faith that Bosnia will become a member, it can be connected mostly to the false promises of politicians and the too long process. According to the same survey from the Direction, in 2014, as many as 90% of citizens were supporting the joining and believing that Bosnia will become a member state, so we can see a decrease of faith. Mostly it is because the situation of everyday lives of citizens is not improving in the sense of economy, in the sense of quality of life, healthcare, and other. And the situation is even much worse now in the time of the pandemic of the coronavirus, when over 35,000 persons from the Federation only lost their jobs. And speaking about EU in the political context of Bosnia, politicians are mostly talking about coordination mechanisms, answers to questionnaire, which sounds quite abstract to average citizens. Also, in general, I believe a promotion of the advantages that EU membership would bring is also very much needed in Bosnia. It is promotion, but obviously insufficient. Also, politicians in Bosnia, they are just decoratively supporting the joining, because it is well known that there is a high level of systematic corruption among them in Bosnia, which would have to come to an end. It was a state of rule of law, which is needed to be for the European Union. So in general, concrete steps and more steps to speed up the process of joining are very much needed. Also, coming again back to your question about the entities, we can notice that some politicians from the RS entity in Bosnia are making closer ties with Russia, whose influence is very much present in Bosnia, but also they are following the approach of Serbia to the integration, so maybe that is the reason of a slightly lower number of support in the RS. And also I have to mention that now in the time of the coronavirus pandemic, the help and support of the European Union to Bosnia was significant in also the sanation of the economic consequences and also in the medical equipment donations. And I believe that citizens very much appreciate such help, and it was very much presented in the media. So I believe the support will now again increase a bit. I think that's it, if you don't have any questions.
Okay, Thank you a lot. What you've said was really interesting, and I think this is something that really deserves a bit more time to discuss, but fortunately we don't have that time. But anyway, it's really good to hear a voice from Bosnia and Herzegovina on that topic. And now I would like to turn to Montenegro, so Marko Pejovic. Marko, what do you think about the further work on European integration process in your country after recent elections, the power shift in Montenegro? What are the plans or maybe predictions of the new government, the new people who are at the power right now?
So in the beginning, it is important to emphasize that the Montenegrin citizens have opted for change by giving a majority to the ex-opposition in the elections held on 30th of August. So the new ruling majority is gathered around Democratic Front, which is considered as a pro-Russian political party. Also, although the agreement between political party that they are a part of new political majority on key issues related to the foreign policy issues is signed. A big part of international public still is wondering in which direction Montenegro is headed and what it means for its European path and foreign policy priorities. However, Montenegro's integration into the EU is one of the few issues in which there is general social consensus that gives a strong wind behind this process. So we can say that in general there is a really high social consensus among all possible social actors in Montenegro from the very beginning of this process, and clearly all those actors support EU story, or let's say joining the EU in general. Also, the actors of the future government must be aware of aspirations and perception of citizens when it comes to the question of support and relies in the foreign policy. In this regard, our research indicates that dominant citizens believe that Montenegro should rely on the EU. So in this regard, I can say that the victory of the ex-opposition could not jeopardize Montenegro's integration path into the EU. On the other side, the outgoing government of Montenegro has accepted the new methodology of the negotiation process, which will serve as a good platform for intensifying the reform process. For Montenegro in technical terms, the new methodology does not mean much, but in political terms, it is a reflection of readiness to build the process and to work on in a more intensive dialogue and with member states, but also with citizens. So what is expected by the new government and the new political majority? The first of all, I would say that this significant political will when it comes to the key reforms, especially in the field of the rule of law and the public administration. Also, regarding the plans and predictions from the point of view of the new government, I would say that the democratic transformation of the country needs to continue through strengthening the rule of law, tackling corruption and organized crime, and ensuring respect of the fundamental rights and protection of minority rights. Particular focus should be given to reforms improving on independence and professionalism of the judiciary system, but also enhancing the functioning of the police, as well as law enforcement authorities in the fight against organized crime and corruption. And in the end, regarding your question on epidemical situation and how it influences people's perception towards EU, I would say that there is no evidence so far that the pandemic have been influencing people's in Montenegro perception of the EU. But according to the latest research that we conducted in August 2020, the public support for the EU membership continuously has been decreasing, and in the August the support was on 54%, which is the historical minimum of the public support in Montenegro.
Okay, thank you. I think that what's most important in what you've said is that your country, that society in your country wished change. They actually managed it. So I think this is the right path to continue. So thank you, Marco, once again. And now my next question goes to Donika Marku, so to Kosovo. Donika, you, on the other hand, in your article mentioned that the Berlin process is not supported enough by all European Union countries, that not all European Union member states support it equally. So how is this situation perceived in Kosovo, and what is the general perception of the EU in Kosovo?
Firstly, the Berlin process has been a stepping stone for Kosovo's regional European perspective. When it comes to European perspective, our latest findings from the Western Balkans security barometer from this month show that over 92% of Kosovar citizens are in favor of European integration. And more than half, 62% of Kosovar citizens that we have been conducting our research with have stated that they believe that European Union has a positive, highly positive impact for Kosovo.
Okay.
And our respondent by is the connection okay?
Right now it is, yes.
Okay, sorry. And most of our respondents have stated that they believe that Kosovo will be part of EU by 2025. However, they also stated that corruption is currently preventing Kosovo from the European integration, so citizens are aware that we should work harder on fighting corruption and rule of law in order to become part of the European Union. When it comes to the Berlin process, it's not that citizens are very well informed, because for Kosovo and Kosovar citizens, the key important topic now related to the European Union is visa liberalization that we are facing. And the struggle that we are having with this process. However, the citizens are aware that at this point, there is nothing from the Kosovo side that has not been done. But this process is seen mostly as something that EU is preventing Kosovo from joining the family of free movement in European Union. So still the citizens in Kosovo are very high in favor of European Union perspective of Kosovo. However, they are aware that there are some problems that we should face, that we should overcome in order to join the European Union.
There's one more question I wanted to ask. Because we know that, that there are tensions between Serbia and Kosovo, but how this complicated regional situation influence the reforms that must be implemented in Kosovo?
Yeah, the situation, of course, has also harmed a bit the cooperation that is foreseen between Kosovo and Serbia and the whole region through the Berlin process also. Even the German Chancellor Merkel in summit in Poznan stated that coordinating projects in the Balkans is not an easy task due to the lack of agreement between Kosovo and Serbia. And it makes it extremely difficult to implement projects and even to continue to further the cooperation. However, at this point, with all the situation being in a stagnation, process of stagnation, it is highly difficult for all the processes to further, and undoubtedly we're waiting for the agreement, which would in some way improve the situation.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so thank you for your remarks and interesting input in this topic. And now, last but not least, I would like to also ask Maria Risteska from North Macedonia about your country's experience, let's say. North Macedonia, after solving this long time name dispute with Greece, has finally managed to open accession talks with the EU. And what's most important, North Macedonia proved that it's not only crucial, but also possible to have a dialogue, even if it's the most pressing situation. So, of course, once again, I wanted to ask you very shortly, what is the Macedonian society's attitude towards EU after these changes, after solving this dispute, and after signing the deal with Greece, and of course after the recent elections in your country? But what is the most important for me, what do you think is the role of think tanks such as yours in the integration process in your country and promoting European values?
Thank you very much. It's correct. Opening negotiations is the decision that has been made, but hasn't happened yet. And although it's a desired outcome, recent news coverage, for example, yesterday Politico had an article on this, shows that this might not happen due to internal and external reasons. Internal being the widespread corruption in the country and lack of rule of law, and external being the lack of support of the EU for further enlargement at this moment, and of course the objection or block now from another EU member state, being Bulgaria. As you know, Macedonian Prime Minister Zaev used a poker strategy tackling the issue with the name. Saying that we are all in, which was demonstrated with the illegal change of the name without consent of citizens, as the referendum results did not approve name change, and with votes in parliament by MPs who were criminally charged and released from detention minutes prior to vote for the name change, with which I think the promise to fight corruption in the country, on which basis the colorful revolution was organized and the government came into power, was totally lost. The name change additionally divided the Macedonian society, and great majority of the ethnic Macedonians feel that their right to self-determination is limited with this change, and that this is sponsored by the EU, which is affecting the support of the Macedonian citizens to the EU accession. The all-in strategy that was applied also opened doors for further blackmailing now from the side of Bulgaria, again using the EU accession process to limit the self-determination rights of the Macedonians. So in my view, the all-in strategy did not prove to be internally productive for the Macedonian accession, especially because the good neighborly relations agenda challenged the basic human rights agenda on which the Union is based and the accession countries are striving to achieve. The success in the good neighborly relations that is praised by the European Union on the one side is in addition used to undermine the prevailing corruption and the lack of rule of law, which is on the other side the reason why the Union is not supporting the accession of Albania and Macedonia. So my personal opinion, and I think the opinion of the majority of people in the country, is that Europeanization should come from inside. And at the moment, we can see that elites are deeply corrupted. Macedonia has record low performance on the corruption perception index, is among countries with hybrid regimes, as portrayed in the latest Nation in Transit report. And we do not see internal factors that can foster Europeanization from inside. On the other side, we have also Europeanization as a process that can be fostered from outside by a European Union playing an active role. But with the current COVID crisis, the Brexit, and the internal issues for stabilization of the European project, we don't see that the EU is also ready to facilitate the Europeanization from outside, which leaves the think tanks like mine, the Center for Research and Policy Making, the think tank that I'm representing, in an absurd situation where we have been established and are working in support and promotion of the EU integration, but without having a timeline and a destination that has been secured. We are promoting values while the EU is undermining the bad performance, for example, that our governments are making in the region, just because the EU is not ready for accession. So this decreases the reputation of the think tanks in the region and in Macedonia including. Many of the think tanks that I follow have decided to provide blank support to the governments on this destination, but I think it's crucial for the think tanks to remain critical, to inform policy reforms, and to be this productive factor that will steer and facilitate Europeanization from inside, so that citizens can see benefits of this process.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. So, as you said, and you said now and I before, that we know that the European Union is in a sort of a crisis, like because of the Brexit and right now the COVID-19 pandemic. So we know that there is a lot, still a lot to do. So, for example, Western Balkan countries have someone to look for and to achieve, goals to achieve. Thank you for this first round of questions, of course. Let me just also remind you and all the guests who listen to our discussion that a part of our project was also a publication that includes 6 articles written by our today's speakers, and this publication is available to download on our website. So I highly encourage you to download it and to read it. And now, as I said, the first round of questions came to an end. Now we can move to the second part, which is also includes question. I would like you to answer these questions shortly, like 2-4 minutes. So I would like to ask you to share with us how your countries sees Poland's role in the European integration process, in the Berlin process. Is there anything else that we can do? What we can do more? And how is it perceived in your countries? Maybe there are some reflections after last year's summit in Poznan. Again, maybe we will start with Ledion from Albania.
Yes, thank you. Poland, with United Kingdom's exit from the European Union, Poland now is the 5th largest country in the European Union. So it's, in a certain way, its weight has increased. Concerning Western Balkans and Albania in particular, Poland has been a very strong supporter of the country's EU integration, even 1 year ago, for example, in October 2019, when France and the other countries vetoed Albania's and North Macedonia's opening of negotiations with the European Union. Poland at the time was the biggest supporter and in this situation. So in a certain way, I say that even though Poland has done a lot and is a big supporter of Albania's and Western Balkans integration, I think Poland has to be more present in the region. Why I say this? For example, even though Albania and Poland has excellent political relations, on the other hand, economic relations and trade between Albania and Poland is minimal. And Polish investments in Albania are almost non-existent. So this is the situation even in a certain way in the other countries of the region. So as I said, Poland now being the 5th largest country in the European Union has to be more practically present in the region. At the same time, in my view, Poland is the most successful of the former communist countries of Eastern Europe in its road towards the European Union. So this experience, this Polish experience of this successful Polish experience, I think Poland has a great asset in its hands, which should be used more, which should be more become as example for not just Albania, for the other Western Balkan countries. Concerning the Berlin process, I'm a little, as I've written at the paper, I'm a little critical of Albania's role in the Berlin process, because Albania has been the country which has received the least projects from the Western Balkans, from the Berlin process. At the same time, some of the first projects financed in this Berlin process were related to Albania. And from the latest assessment of the European Commission of 2019, these projects were still in the design or in the first phases. So in a certain way, I think Albania has benefited less, not because of the process, but in my view, it's a problem with Albania itself, with the government from the Berlin process. As I said, Poland should be more concrete, should be more in a practical way present, not just in the process, but in general in the Western Balkans, because it has a potential to become much more involved economically and politically in the region and towards Albania in particular. Thank you.
Okay, thank you a lot. Now, Jelica Minic, if you could share with us your point of view.
Yes, I only, in the first round of questions, answering the questions, I didn't say anything about COVID in Serbia. And I just would like to say that at the very beginning, China came first with the assistance, and there was the euphoria in Serbia regarding China, and billboards thanking China for assistance, etc., but that European solidarity is fairy tale, etc., etc. But it changed rather quickly, because the European Union, in fact, gave the greatest assistance to all our countries. So I just forgot to say that. Regarding Poland in the Berlin process, I believe it's very good that Poland joined the club, let us say, although Poland always joined Visegrad Group declaration supporting the accession of Western Balkan countries to the EU, and the Visegrad Group in general presented itself like the advocate of enlargement and of the accession of the Western Balkan countries. But Poland specifically declared itself now as an advocate, and it was well perceived, not only in Serbia, I believe in the whole region. There is no country in the region that has any bad memories, historical memories with Poland. So it's a great advantage. Poland is coming to the region without any burden, historical burden. And as a big European country, Poland could secure for itself a very good position in the region using this political credit, historical and political credit. But Poland, before Poznan summit, Poland has not been very much involved in Western Balkan affairs, only through Visegrad Group, although Serbia has a very good economic cooperation with Poland. Our trade achieved more than 1 billion euros in 2018. And in first 9 months of 2019, it was also around 1 billion, only for 9 months. So it means that economic cooperation has been developing rather well. And there is also cultural cooperation, but there are many other fields. And Poland made a few innovations during the Poznan summit, introducing the local level into the concept of the Berlin process. It's very important because European integration is guided top down, but the absorption of European standards, values, policies is coming bottom up from inside. Somebody says before that things should develop from inside, and the local level is very important in that respect. Poland also raised some issues which are very fundamental, not for all Western Balkan countries. Albania doesn't have this problem, but we have in other countries of the Western Balkans problems with thermal power plants based on coal. And we have to go through green transition according to this new economic and investment plan. It is expected that all our countries undertake measures in that respect, and Poland offered support and help in making transition in the mining regions. Mostly these are regions where the coal is exploited. It is a very serious problem in our region because we pollute the European Union. Our 8 thermal power plants, like 200, maybe 270 thermal power plants in Europe. Only our 8 thermal power plants as all thermal power plants in the European Union. So the level of pollution is horrible. And this is something that we are going to work together with the European Union, and where Poland also made some concrete support how to recover these regions that will be deprived of sources of how to say employment and everything that their life is based on. And the other innovation was a mixture of entrepreneurs, experts, think tank community, with the ministries. They took part at ministerial meetings. It was very democratic, let us say, summit of the Berlin process comparing to previous summits. And especially this establishment of the think tank forum, which was really one of the core brainstorming sessions during the Berlin Process Summit. And the outcome of that is the let us say, the consortia that has been established between think tanks from the Visegrad group and think tanks from the Western Balkans. They will work for a short period together. In fact, sharing experiences of the Visegrad group, and trying to articulate together some useful policies, recommendations, measures in different areas that are important for European integration of our countries. Poland was not very visible in our region before the Poznan summit. And then suddenly, through our media, it was covered rather well. There are especially some regional media covering the region, like European Western Balkans, or this regular media overview done by the Regional Cooperation Council, informing people in the administration, the administrations of all Western Balkan countries and beyond, that kept the public rather informed about each summit of the Berlin process. But now, again, Poland is disappearing from the horizon. And I believe that Poland could do something in increasing its visibility, in intensifying communication with Western Balkan countries. And it would be well perceived. Poland has high capacity, Adam Mickiewicz Institute for Polish Culture. So there are many opportunities besides economic field, where I'm sure Poland is going to be much more involved, because Poland needs this corridor north-south. And also the Chinese Belt and Road initiative is connecting north and south, east, west in Europe. So I believe the communication will be intensified. Poland also contributed to the Western Balkan investment framework, became one of bilateral donors. So it means that Poland is going to be involved into the infrastructure building and recovery in our region. And that Poland, it means that Poland will be more involved in this economic and investment plan, what will be good for us and good for Poland.
Okay, thank you, Jelica, a lot. Now the same question I would like to ask to Sanita. Shortly, also tell us something about what do you think of the topic.
Of course. So Poland's support in the EU integration process remains very important for Bosnia. The Berlin process and the Visegrad Group initiative have been two good examples of this support and where it was shown. In my article, I was writing about the strategic importance of the Polish pre-signing in 2019, which is based on a few facts, such as Poland can be classified as a new EU country. Also, Poland has undertaken a serious chain of reforms, so it has the experience which can be relatable to the Western Balkan countries, including Bosnia and Herzegovina. And also, the most important thing, that Poland has a long-term commitment to the EU enlargement and the integrations of the Western Balkan countries. Although it's not much emphasized in the public, the commitment has a history. So the history is starting in the 1990s, when Poland strived to join the EU and NATO, and so became involved in the missions in Western Balkans, which was very important for Bosnia and Herzegovina because of the engagement of Polish soldiers in the UNPROFOR during the war in the UNMI page and EUFOR Althea and OSCE missions and so on. And the Poland's program of presidency within the Berlin process, it was based on this long-term commission and the integration of the Western Balkans, and it also has paid attention to security threats and challenges which are important to all of us currently, such as migration, terrorism, extremist attitudes, cyber threats, etc. Also considering the public in Bosnia, after this summit, in a Bosnian daily newspaper, the ambassador Vjeslav Tarka, the Poznan summit coordinator, he stated how the EU is not complete without the Western Balkans, adding that the accession is in the interest of Poland, and also how Poland is very enthusiastic about enlargement because it believes that the Western Balkans are a part of Europe. I believe that such messages are very much positive and needed to emphasize the influence of Poland and the possible influence it could have in this region. Also, after the Poznan summit, it was emphasized in the Bosnian media that Bosnia was the largest recipient of EU grants for infrastructure projects in the Western Balkan region. So Bosnia received over 96 million in EU grants, which was also very positive for us. But personally, I believe that the support exists and it's very valuable, but it should be more public promoted because it is not that much known to the wider audience. Also, Jelica mentioned the same, that Poland should raise its visibility within this region and that it will be for importance both for Poland and the region. That's it in short.
Okay, thank you a lot, Sanita. Now the same question to Marco. Marco, what is the Montenegro's perspective? No? Marco, we cannot hear you, unfortunately. Okay.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, yes.
Okay, so sorry for this. Poland's participation is particularly important as a country that actively supports a larger policy with obligatory conditions of fulfilling the required reforms, because its presidency of Berlin process coincided with the beginning of the new European Parliament and the new mandate of the European Commission, which began with strong and encouraging messages on the enlargement. Given that the enlargement policy was not high in the agenda of the European Commission previous one. So due to Montenegrin excellent bilateral relations with Poland, and as Poland's involvement in this process was warmly welcomed, Montenegro recognized Polish involvement as an additional incentive in the realization of Montenegro's European aspiration, given that one of the goals of the Polish presidency was to keep the Western Balkan 6 high on the agenda of the European Commission, and in addition to that, the results and effects of the Poland's 15-year membership in the EU clearly show that the accession in this difficult process, but it's really worth in general. So furthermore, the importance of cooperation within NATO alliance is emphasized as an added value to the bilateral relations between Poland and Montenegro. Also, I would like to agree with that what colleague Jelica Vinic said. Poland is the first presiding country of the Berlin process that changed the approach towards the Western Balkan region. So contrary to the ex-cathedra concept, most often pursued by the EU. Namely, unlike the previous presidency countries, Poland used the concept hearing the region. So what is important, what we are facing as a countries, what should be changed, what are mistakes, etc. So moreover, the most important representatives of the Poland visited the region and held the meetings with representatives of different ministries and organizations in the region, even on the technical, even on expert or political level, especially considering the regional meetings in the field of civil society sector in Skopje, and the meeting of the ministries of foreign affairs, which indicates that Poland efforts aimed in strengthening stability and better economic development for all. Montenegro particularly appreciates the sharing of Poland's experience in the EU accession process and cross-border cooperation, as well as experience from local and regional authorities in strengthening the socio-economic development. On the other hand, providing a space for networking of different entrepreneurs and platforms for businesses, officials, and civil society organizations within the Business Forum and Civil Society Forum. That's it.
Okay. Thank you, Martin. Thank you for the voice from Montenegro. And now I would like to ask Donika, Marku, what is your perception and your perspective on this topic, on the role of Poland in the European integration of Western Balkan countries?
Well, even though throughout the years, the Western Balkans have not been the key sphere of interest for Poland, since we're not the first neighbors for Poland, Poland has used the Berlin process as a platform to establish strategic relations with the Western Balkans. And the summit in Poznan highlighted Poland's wish to be more involved in the Berlin process and with the region as a whole. And it also has given its transformation experience, and it's willing to do so in the continuous steps. And with the increased role of Poland in European Union, it is left to be seen how Poland is going to deepen its connection with the Western Balkans, and hopefully this will be through investments in this region.
Okay, so thank you for your compendious and short answer to this question. And finally, Maria. What can you tell us about this problem?
Sorry, I was muted.
Yes, okay, it's fine.
Sorry. My thinking is that the Poznan, the think tank forum format that was initiated by the Polish presidency in the Berlin process really made the change, because previously only the inclusion of civil society in the process was assessed as very positive democratic development for the region. However, many observers said that the discussions that were between the government and the civil society in the Berlin process format was too general and did not reflect on the previous work done. So including think tanks in these discussions as an initiative by the Polish presidency made a change, because of course think tanks know how to structure policy dialogue, how to formulate policy relevant ideas to the governments. But I was present at the Poznan summit, and my perception to it was that there was a strong mismatch between what the Berlin process and the government's needs are. Mainly related to policy advice and support, monitoring of achievements in economic development, connectivity and investments, and what were the discussions on the think tank forum. I must say I was rather disappointed that it was mostly dominated by topics related to human rights, to corruption, to governance and issues like that, which is important and relevant for these other issues like connectivity, investments, and economic development, but not specifically. There were not very specific discussions on these very topics, economic development, connectivity, and investments. And I think this is an entry point for Poland. Why I believe this? because actually Poland is characterized with many economic think tanks that are not sufficient enough in number in the Western Balkans. Economic think tanks that have actually facilitated the economic transformation of Poland and the success story economically Poland has even now as a member of the European Union, is one of the best performing economies in the Union, and to actually play an active role into transferring knowledge, building capacities of this think tank scene, economic think tank scene, which is not developed enough in the Western Balkans. There is scarcity of economic think tanks, and the ideas still are relevant to inform the Berlin process in the Western Balkans and in Macedonia. So I would recommend that the EU, through RCC, should provide incentives for economic analysis related to the connectivity agenda, to MAPREA and overall economic development, but not to limit this to the regional cooperation only between the Western Balkans, but to facilitate knowledge sharing, lessons learning and inspiration opportunity between Poland and Western Balkans. We can also use the Visegrad funds and other available, maybe direct funding from the Polish Foreign Ministry, but it is crucial that we use this knowledge, experience to be transferred to the Western Balkans and to mobilize more the debate, Europeanization debate in Europe, in the region, more on the economic topics, which Poland and the economic think tanks of Poland can offer.
Okay, so first of all, let me thank you all for your input also in this part of discussion. So I'm glad that it is noticed that Poland's experience is being noticed in the Western Balkan countries. We can see that there is still something to do in this matter, but I hope that this experience that we gained through our path towards European Union is something that we can successfully share and be proud of. Unfortunately, we don't have more time for our discussion, but I would like to thank our panelists for today's discussion. I think and I hope that we proved that the integration process of Western Balkan countries is still something that should be on European Union's agenda and also on Poland's agenda. I hope that maybe next year, if the situation allows, we will be able to organize this kind of discussion face-to-face in a regular conference, for example, in Economic Forum in Poland. So I invite you all next year, of course. So thank you once again. Stay healthy and goodbye.